good evening, and welcome to the Special Board of Commissioners meeting for Radnor Township here on Monday, January 14th. Would you all please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here this evening, and thank you for scheduling this. This is the first of a series of meetings over the next 10 months, I think, we have scheduled to deal with nothing but the financial status of the township. So we'll start this meeting with public participation. Is there any comments from the public that's here with us this evening?
Good for now.
Well, this will be our only opportunity, will it? As we go along.
Well, we could have public comment again at the end if there's something you wanted to comment on.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
Since we're going to be discussing a lot.
I'm just curious to what is going to be discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we will hold public participation until the end, once people have the opportunity to see what we're talking about. At the request of staff, we are flipping items 2 and 3, so we're going to start with the discussion of township finances, and I guess we're going to throw that to you, Mr. White.
Thank you. It's the first time I've been asked that question by the TV. All right. Well, thanks for scheduling the meeting. We thought maybe a good place to start is kind of stepping back for a moment and looking at, well, not only how we ended up 2018, because the last set of numbers we were looking at when the budget was adopted, we had actuals through the end of November, and December's an important month. So we wanted to give the board an update on how we finished on a cash basis, so I'll do that first. And then we'll go through kind of a glimpse back on how the budget has been built. I recognize the fact that a lot of you are new or newish to the commission, and a lot of decisions were made 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago that we spend a lot of time talking about, and you'll see in the budget. Well, we wanted to kind of step back and go through those to hopefully provide some context to you on how those decisions came about and what it's meant to the budget since their inclusion, or since we've gone on all these years. So I'll do that as well. This won't take a whole lot of time, but it'll leave a lot at the end then for any kind of questions and discussion. And then hopefully it'll lend itself into scheduling the meetings as the agenda is laid out with each of the monthly meetings going forward. So I'll start with how we ended up 2018. I provided, this slide shows when we were looking at the budget, we were anticipating a pretty significant shortfall in the general fund, and we spent a lot of time talking about why that was, mostly in the difference between what we thought the business taxes would generate and what they were actually generating. And then there was a significant shortfall in our other revenue, most of which, or some of which, was in getting the sewer money back into the general fund. You guys adopted the note ordinance. We were able to return roughly $1 million back to the general fund from the sewer fund. There's still more to be returned, but we have some checks we got to cut for some of the project expenses that are incurred but not yet paid. Once those are paid on a cash basis, then we'll draw down on the note and get that money back to the general fund as well. And then December ended up being a pretty good month for the Act 511, both in terms of late filers. We had a couple come in December, and then we had two audit payments, one of which we were expecting, the other we were not expecting, but that audit closed in December and the business paid. So on the expense side, things ended pretty much where we thought they would, slightly under where we thought they were going to end when we were looking at the numbers in November. But instead of being roughly 2.4 million shortfall, it ended up only being about 600,000, a $600,000 shortfall in the general fund, which when that flows through to the cash balance, it had a pretty significant positive impact on where the cash ended up. So when we advanced that to include the things that were part of the budget ordinance at your direction, including the millage, putting back in the OPEB funding plan, as well as the $115,000 for the fire company and the senior center. This 2019 board column represents what the budget looks like now. The only thing that's really changed is the cash figures. So whereas we knew there was going to be a deficit going into the year, even with the tax adjustment, that is still the case. We're still $500,000 deficit spending for 2019. But where we thought we were going to come in short on the fund balance now looks a little bit better because the general fund ended 2018 with a little bit more cash. So it's good news in that we ended up with a little bit more cash than we thought we would. But the underlying issues that we wanted to have these meetings to address still exist, because what's not included in the 2019 budget are still some significant items like capital funding and some of the other things that we've learned that we can't really rely on the business taxes to cover on our ongoing basis.
Bill, can we ask questions while you go through this rather than have you go back?
Sure.
First, on that audit, you said it closed in December. When did those checks come in for those audit payments?
In December.
They came in December?
Yeah, it closed with check in hand.
Okay. And the excess fund balance, explain to me how we got this, because 878 was the fund balance excess under the original forecast. And then this is 19 board. So what are you comparing right here? 18 budget, 19 board.
So the formulas that are happening here is there's two different layers to our fund balance policy. The first is a 15% requirement. And the way that the code is written is that the fund balance policy is 15% unless our business taxes make up more than 30% of the general fund revenue. And if that is the case, then the fund balance target goes from 15 to 25%. So this percentage here is telling us what the Act 511 revenue percentage is to the overall general fund budget. And if it's over 30%, then these are the figures here we would use to determine what the fund balance policy is. So this is these numbers here, the 9.3, the 8.6, and the 8.8, it's just 25% of that year's or that column's total expenses. And then it's just subtracting the ending cash from what the target balance would be and providing an excess or shortfall.
Right, so why was it 878 in the middle column and 167 when the modified net revenues had a lower net shortfall in 19?
I'm not sure
Why is
Same way, sir.
878,
yeah, 870,
167?
right. Well, the difference between those two numbers is basically the drop in the cash balance. So this is saying that for 2018, on a cash basis, the fund balance is going to be roughly 878 above the target. And after we spend down if everything happens exactly as budgeted.
That's what, my question is, what are you comparing here? What,
Different years, Rich.
it's different years, right? So what, so is it just year to year? You got 218 and 119. What are you showing? You showing an improvement? You got budget, forecast, board. So what's the so what of that chart right there?
All right, so the budget column represents what the board adopted or what we thought the numbers would look like a year ago, or when the 2018 budget was passed at the end of 2017. So we keep that, we report on that information just as where we started from as the launching point. 2018 forecast is, it's 2018 actual in terms of cash. This is where we actually ended the year and ended 2018 at. And then they're just rolling the cash balance forward, this $9,451,000, rolling that forward to 2019. This column is calculating what the revenue and expense activity is budgeted for 2019. And then this is just calculating how we're performing against the fund balance policy.
So 2019 board is actually 2019 budget.
Yeah, the board approved budget, yes.
Okay.
And when we were looking at these numbers back at the end of November, early December, this, where we thought we were going to end with the fund balance was a negative figure. So we're ending 2018 with more cash, which is flowing through, and it looks like if everything occurs as budgeted, for 2019 we would end in compliance with our fund balance policy.
Right, so I thought you were showing 2019. So where's the 2019, where's what we originally thought the 2019 board column would look like last month?
I didn't include it here. Part of the...
That's what I thought 2018 forecast was. That's what I... So
yeah, sorry. No, these are screenshots from a live spreadsheet. So once I update it, I lose what it looked like before,
okay,
without deleting a bunch of information. And actually, I thought of that this afternoon. It would be nice if I would have taken a screenshot of that before I updated everything. But
what it shows, though, is we always planned on having a deficit for 2018.
we've known, yeah, ever since May of 2018, we knew we were going to end at a deficit because the business taxes came in so far under what we thought they'd be.
Okay.
And then throughout the budget process for 19, we always knew that it was going to be tough to overcome that same deficit for 2019. But I mean, the takeaway really is that because 18 ended up fairly significantly better off, it looks like 2019 we might be in good shape with our fund balance policy. Obviously, we have 12 months of activity to get through, and in the business tax projection.
And we haven't funded any projects either.
Yeah, well, hence
Including the ones we approved.
a couple of them, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually a good segue. So the one thing that I wanted to touch on, and again, this is just, it's not a political statement. It's what it is. This table actually is in the budget in the executive summary when we talk about what the real estate taxes for the township have looked like going back to 2011. What we haven't spent a lot of time, or we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, is that for 7 budgets, for operations, the millage for the township has been the same. There was an adjustment in 2016 that revenue is directly paying for the library, park, and trail bonds that were issued at the end of 15. But for operational purposes, the millage rate for the township or for the general fund has been the same. And when we take a look at what that means in terms of revenue, is that for the last 7 budgets for real estate taxes, or for a third of our revenues, it has remained relatively constant. And I'm setting the table for the discussion on the expense side, and that time frame from 2012 to 2018, we've experienced significant cost drivers in some of the more expensive areas of our budget. And we spent a lot of time talking about this, so none of it's news or new information. But what I did is I pulled these cost drivers out for the same time period as the millage rates. In our MMOs on the pension side jumped mostly in 13 and 14, and they've stabilized since. But that was a big jump there. We spent a lot of time talking about the OPEB funding plan. That's another one that's jumped up. The reason why it spiked in 13 is we had a significant overage in our fund balance, and the board elected to take a big chunk of that and move it to help fund OPEB. So that's why that 2013 jumps way up. But the regular payments as part of the plan are increasing annually.
So they're not jumping up, they're increasing by plan.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, they're increasing by plan, and remember, a significant piece of the funding plan is having to pay for the health care for retirees today.
Yep.
That goes up every year, as in addition to the payments that we're making for the plan. And then we have the capital piece of it, and I didn't intend on getting a whole lot of detail or history with the capital, because in all likelihood we'll have a special meeting dedicated just for that topic. But for the early 2000s, and we've tracked it all the way back to 1990, the township did not have any kind of dedicated funding from the general fund for capital, at least nothing that we could find. What appeared was the practice was that the township would periodically, every 4, 5, 6, 7 years, depending on how long the money would last, is do a significant bond issue, anywhere from 10 to 15 million, and then use those bond proceeds for the capital plan, again, for however many years it may last. And then once they needed to replenish, do a new bond issue. And so that practice occurred all the way up until it stopped in 2008, which is, I think, at a point in time in the township's history where a lot of things were paused and reevaluated. Capital funding was definitely one of them. Since 2012, the only new borrowings or new money borrowings that have been done were, there was the Ardrossan, that has a significant piece of it that has dedicated funding through the real estate transfer tax. The remaining portion, there's voted millage that was never enacted. Instead, it's been general fund transfers that have covered that. The other new money was for a termination of a swap agreement, which was originally transacted by the township in 2003, 2004, one of the initial borrowings to construct this building. A piece of that was a swap agreement with a third party, and the way interest rates played out was that the township was significantly underwater on it, which it made sense to buy our way out, which we did. So we issued about $4 million, a little less than $4 million back in 2013 to buy out of that. And then the other new money issue was for the library, parks, and trails, and the board at the time increased the millage rate to pay for that. So for all of our other capital, since basically 2008, we've used general fund money to pay for. And again, looking at this from 2012 to 2018, there's been a significant amount of money annually moved for capital, but no revenue as yet, really, no reoccurring revenue to pay for it, which is kind of what we ran into at the end of 2018. And without the revenue, it's hard to sustain those level of transfers. And then the fire company funding, this has been a relatively new jump within the last 2 or 3 years, where it was pretty stable for a while, and then as we've heard from Radnor Fire and the issues they're experiencing there, that's jumped up. And this, of course, I'm only have these numbers through 2018, so it doesn't include the 100,000 again for 2019. And then the one other significant driver that kind of gets lost in the discussion is back in 2012, we had 9 vacant police positions. Many of those were vacant intentionally while we were negotiating a replacement collective bargaining agreement. There were terms and conditions the township wanted, and through negotiating with the FOP, we landed at a good place, and ultimately the board accepted some pretty significant benefit reductions for the new officers. That collective bargaining agreement was approved in 2013, and we actually tried very hard to replace those positions, but the quality of the candidates slowed that process down significantly, to the point where just last year we were able to get all the way back up to the full complement of 45. But in that span, we have added 9 officers to the payrolls at a significant expense, at roughly $1.1 million. And I didn't go back through officer by officer. I took an average and carried that forward in each of the years. So that $1.125 million is an approximate. But it is a significant amount of expense that we've added to the budget over that time period. So when you kind of bottle it all up, we can see that we've added roughly $6.8 million to our annual expenses from 2012 to 2018, and there weren't any offsetting or corresponding real estate tax adjustments during that time, which lends the question, how was the township able to absorb that or do that? And what we did is we relied heavily on the growth of the business taxes, which this conversation would have been had in 2013 had the business taxes not taken off the way they did, and then stayed at a high level for all those years. And then the other financial impact that we benefited from was one-time permitting revenue from large redevelopment projects, ranging anywhere from $1 million to $2.5 million per project. So that's how, on the revenue side, that's how we were able to add on and do, increase our pension funding, add the OPEB funding plan, fund our capital for 6 years, bring on the police officers, and do those things without raising real estate taxes. The other items we wanted to highlight is there were several reorganizations over that time where we have reduced some non-police related headcount. There is the new healthcare program that was enacted in 2017 that reduced the healthcare costs pretty significantly for the administrative and rate employees. And then, quite honestly, there's been many projects, initiatives, and other priorities that have just been postponed or shelved, some of which were approved and then shelved. But that lends itself to kind of where we're at today, where, and I did want to note that everything that we've stepped through doesn't even include our sanitary sewer, public utility, or the stormwater, because those are funded with proceeds outside of the millage rate. They have their own dedicated fees that are used to pay for those programs. So those were not included in the analysis there. We don't use either of those 2 fees to pay for any of the items that I touched on earlier, including the capital. Those were just general capital. So the question of whether or not it's sustainable, this is an ongoing discussion. But I think the volatility we've seen in the business tax revenues now, We saw it in 2008 and 9, where they took a multi-million-dollar drop. And then again in 17 to 18, that show that any kind of heavy reliance on those revenues is probably not sustainable. And to help validate that point to a certain extent, even with the business tax revenue gains that we realized and all of the growth in the highlighted areas that I touched on, many areas of the township budget still have gone unfunded, or unaddressed. I shouldn't say unfunded, unaddressed on a long-term basis. We still are without a long-term plan for capital funding. Our fire company funding has become a bigger and bigger question mark on the long-term basis. Long-term community organization funding and allocations, those numbers have grown, and they just kind of grown during our budget process. They haven't really been fully evaluated or discussed. We heard during the budget process this last year about our tree program. We've talked about in other meetings sidewalk maintenance, replacement, and many, many other things that are just, the list is too long to include on a slide. But the point that I was trying to make here is that while we did realize a lot of very positive revenue growth, and we were able to do kind of clean our financial house up over those years with it, it wasn't large enough to be able to address some of these other issues that need to be addressed, or that decisions need to be made on. So this is why we asked if we could switch 2 and 3, because it lends itself into some of the areas that do need to be discussed, and that was the idea of scheduling these special meetings throughout the year, was to dedicate specific time and attention to each of these items that it's very, very difficult to do during a regular board agenda with everything else going on in those agendas. So what the township manager and I did is we sketched up a draft here on what the meeting topics might look like. We can play with these, we move them around, we can add, subtract. But we wanted to at least provide a launch.
Before we move on to that, I think it's important for the newer members to understand some of the practices that you and Bob dug out when you got here. For example, they were using bonds, 30-year bonds, to pay for short-term assets. Money was being moved out of the sewer fund and out of the park maintenance fund in order to balance the general fund.
Yeah.
So things like that.
And those, though, they were not insignificant. So the capital one, that was one of the more immediate, and a lot of these findings came out of what the original CB-FAC did back in 2010, when we worked with them on digging through all the books.
Just trying to answer their questions.
Yeah, these are the things that we unearthed. The township was using 20 and 30-year bonds to buy police cars, and pickup trucks. And
this building itself was from a financing point.
Expensive. It was expensive. The swap agreement, which probably made a lot of sense when it was entered into, because
we weren't alone.
Interest rate forecast suggested it was going to work out, and then interest rates didn't move for the next decade. So Radnor certainly wasn't alone there. But Radnor was one of the few that took the initiative to buy their way out of it and lock in fixed interest rates when they were at 1% versus paying the variable rate at 6, 7, 8%. So that was well-timed and a good decision to get out of that. The other problem with the swap agreement is the township took $1 million up front, and that $1 million was immediately spent instead of banked and put into some sort of sinking fund to help pay for the future debt service, which it's neither here nor there. That's just how it was treated. And then you're right, there was hundreds of thousands of dollars from the sewer fund that was being transferred back to the general fund under the under overhead. but it was not anything that was able to be tracked. So that was stopped. And I think the forensic accounting report suggested that that was the money that was being used to help pay for the bonuses, or at least cover up, or on the books, cover up where the bonuses were being paid from. So, and then same with the park and open space, which the only source of revenue for that fund is the 25% of the township share of the real estate transfer taxes. So 100% of those dollars are being used to pay for debt service on open space. So there was no excess money for anything else. Definitely should not have been used to pay for general fund operating. But yeah, those were all, I mean, those things were part of the CBFAC report from 2010. And the report listed dozens of other findings and recommendations as well. Those were some of the more significant ones. So, and that immediately brought capital to the forefront. Is we're going to stop using bond money to pay for police cars. What are we going to use to pay for police cars? And it just so happened that business taxes increased immediately, and the money became available to buy the short-term assets with it. Yeah, and there's that could be a special meeting unto itself. But
Well, anyway, we're not doing that anymore, so that's 8
Right.
years ago.
It is 8 years ago. Yep.
So don't need to worry about that anymore.
But it does provide some context, because you might otherwise wonder, how could the township get to this point without a capital funding plan? And that's how. It's those kind of decisions. So what we've sketched out here is, I guess, a starting point for setting the topics for the future month's meetings. And then, like I said, these are just a recommendation. We can move them around as you see fit, but we wanted to provide at least a spot to start from and go from there. So this is the last slide in what I had prepared, so we can ask questions and figure this out.
Does anyone have any thoughts with regards to what staff's laid out here for us to go through?
What's the, can you explain the last one, safety service communications?
That deals with the issues we have with certain areas of the township where you can't communicate.
Delcom.
You can make issues with Delcom. So I think that would be a good one for the end, since there are different pieces moving now.
Would that be part of capital, or if we were gonna, or do you think that needs to be handled by itself?
I would leave it sit where that is, but that'll be about the time when the board's looking to approve your budget, so that could move within the capital.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we wanted to deal with that, is that kind of late to look at that?
So I didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves in terms of, like, so to that point, we also have township facilities identified the month in October with buildings, parks, trails, etc., and even to a certain extent tree maintenance and sidewalks. All of those have a capital component. So what I would anticipate is that if we had the capital meeting earlier in the year, we would talk in a more broader sense, instead of trying to identify specific projects, talk in a broader sense of funding and prioritization, and then working through more of the specific projects in the following months. So that's why you might see things that, well, that could be capital, that could be capital. I don't think in one night we'd be able to talk about capital funding and then also try to drill through all the projects that might encompass.
But you already have the budget in this last budget. You saw all the proposed projects in the years out that aren't funded, so that kind of could be the starting point of, here's all the different items. The board decides, yes, no, maybe, short-term, mid-term, long-term. How do you actually try to balance that? Because there's no expectations you can fund it all right now. Can't 5 years, 10 years? How does the board want to address all these?
If we keep it as is, and we have a subcommittee meeting, say, April, May time period, looking at emergency communications, I mean, I would think we'd want to bump safety service up at that point, just so it's fresh in everyone's mind, and we can have that discussion based on what we hear from Delco.
Well, and I would think a lot of this, the board, it's fluid here, so that you have this, and you may say there's something else that's changed, so you would want to address something, move up, down, however you want to. I know we talked about possibly, 2 topics a night, but then you might have drift where, I think, because these are very big items, and to be aware of your time and the community's time, specifically stick with those, because you can prepare.
I would just like to clarify one thing on the March 18th meeting. I think that it should read fire companies funding. I know that the Radnor does most of it, but I would certainly want to include Broomall as well as Bryn Mawr.
The intent is Broomall and Bryn Mawr as part of the
How it reads and what's said.
Okay.
On the safety service communications, I thought we had instructed the administration to work with the county to put up an antenna last year.
Not that I'm aware of, because with the county, with that, someone has to pay for it. We don't have any money to pay for that. Plus, we don't know, are we just addressing the radio side of it? There's other options, but the radio side is a big part of it, but I don't recall us.
Yeah, we said last year we were going to, that was the instruction.
I believe that might have been assigned to the Communications Council. I believe one night we were there.
Now, I think what Rich is talking about, when we voted on to prohibit cell towers in the parks, we talked about the emergency communication side, and we all agreed the antenna was the best way to go.
Yep.
And then we would work along that path. We tried to hold a meeting through the Communications Council with Delaware County, and that meeting was canceled for lack of quorum. But we did hear good information that night from Delcom, and we need to try to get them back in here to have that conversation again with the public, so they can see where the county's going based on requirements that they have and ideas that they think are the best way forward.
So we have an estimate between $250,000 and $500,000 to put the antenna. It's just where does it go? Because it has to be up tall enough and high enough.
And based on the conversation we had, my recollection, they said Radnor may not be the best place for it.
That's true. So to help us, it'd be great if Haverford or Newtown Square put it up for us. That helped us. That's great. Well, that's sure.
Right.
How accommodating they'd be to put an antenna up that tall.
Road.
Why can't we put it on this antenna right here?
You have coverage zones. I tell you, this is a whole discussion. That is a whole meeting on itself.
It's too close, okay.
The coverage area isn't big enough. So, but I think there's opportunities for us to discuss. And as I said, subcommittee meeting was great.
Yeah.
All of that.
Could you reach out to the other townships? Is that appropriate, or it's not going to be?
Delcom does.
Well, again, Delcom, they have new requirements that are coming on board, so I think they're just starting to look at this too.
Well, they're under a federal directive to change to digital.
Right, within
And
5
they-
years.
Within 5 years, and that'll double the number of antennas.
Right.
So.
And the other part comes into, like we talked about, stormwater is if someone says to us, well, you need to correct your stormwater flooding issues because it's hitting us, are we willing to spend $2 or $3 million to help somebody else's issue? And then if someone came to us and said, would you mind putting a large antenna up in your town because it will help Delaware County, and they pick a spot that the board says, come on, ready to give them, we want it there. It's that whole conversation about where they best go.
What do these antennas typically look like? Are they like the fake trees? Do they
No, they're whips.
You would look at similar to a lattice. You could look at a lattice tower. There's different options for antennas. You can put a monopole up if you wanted to. But it's all depending on the looks, the height, location. There's a lot of work that has to be done And then it would come back to the board, you would decide then what the look is like and the look.
Do we have to accept it if it is in our, or?
If it benefits us, but again, I think
let's move on.
Yeah.
I want to make sure
But
that it's not
the-
put in a neighborhood that doesn't want it.
yeah, I don't think anybody's
Don't
gonna do
limit it,
that.
don't
That's a good point, or a good point regarding subcommittees, is that if there's a topic that can be addressed in the board's different subcommittees where it gets vetted out enough there, then it may not require a special night, and it can be incorporated into a regular board agenda because all the details have been hashed out already. That may be an example of one that can be vetted out there versus on this list.
Within the
But it's a good
context
point.
of these recommendations, where would you see staffing and organization? I mean, that's a real issue too.
Maybe it's almost an ongoing one.
Agreed.
Maybe that's in the personnel committee that is addressed.
I wasn't sure if you was,
I'm-
I thought you.
yeah, sorry. No,
I was
it's a-
like, gonna say something. I'm like.
It got to the tip of my tongue and it stopped.
Sorry.
Happens
I didn't want to
sometimes.
interrupt you.
No, that's all right. It might have been the filter more than anything else. Sometimes.
So given that there's so many things that we do need to address, and I for one think it is good that we start talking about these early. I think it's good we can engage the community, as we go along. I'm sure there'll be more people interested in the various topics. We'll put this out there so everybody knows what we're talking about. But, if there was going to be a result of these, and certainly we're not going to have meetings and figure out how we're going to figure this out for the 2020 budget. I mean, some of these things are definitely going to be long-term planning. What do you see as the biggest priorities?
There's so many.
All those
This is
things.
this here is just some of them that we saw that just didn't even get up on the board that we have worked on. So there's just a lot. This we put as a template for you just to start the conversation. So if you say, you know what, let's move safety communications up to another date, or let's bump this one backwards. It could be very possible that, say, community organization funding, the board just decides that a percentage of the budget will be set aside for community organization funding, and then however that percent goes, then it's divvied up amongst those groups. It's just that way. Because, Bill showed like fire funding, and those they just they're going to keep asking for more and more. And what is our obligation as a community to fund some other organizations that are not ours, that we have our own funding mechanisms and issues that we've got to address. So those are all things that have to be discussed.
Well, the other component, or the other thought process behind it is just like a three-dimensional puzzle. If we have a comprehensive discussion about fire company funding, and it's been talked about before, if there's dedicated millage to fund the fire companies in one form or another, whether it's voted or the Board of Commissioners decides to enact it, at $1 million a year, which is roughly what we're providing the three companies, both in terms of operations and capital, if enough separate funding to generate, and I'm thinking out loud, I'm not making a recommendation or proposal, but if enough is generated to fund the fire companies outside of what currently exists, then there's $1 million now that the board has discretion on to solve some of the other items that are on that list. So that's kind of how fire companies got moved up to the top. And then capital funding, there was a proposal made a couple years ago by CARFAC that there might be a way to generate a significant piece of that without adding a whole lot of expense to the township's annual budget. If we can get there and have that discussion and get it and have everyone agree, at least in concept, then that might make it easier to have discussions on some of these other items, knowing that you're not still trying to come up with $1 million a year to fund capital, or $2 million, that's kind of already put to bed. So we can spend more time or have more flexibility in discussing community organizations or adding money for tree maintenance. So that's kind of the ordering. And when we were having our discussion, is if we can, one decision might free up money to help other decisions be made down the waterfall.
I also think too, Lisa, your idea about, the date we had set for a special meeting on February 19th, to have that as goal setting, really that sets the course for the board setting policy goals and that, which is, I think, a valuable tool in this, which leads forward, so I think that was...
Yeah, we kind of skipped right over that. That probably is the most important one that's up there, so.
And then it keeps the board from, again, just keep adding more and more nights, because we know your subcommittee work, and that I know a number of you said you want to do subcommittees, so it kind of keeps those dates down.
All right. Any other questions or concerns from the board?
How long are those meetings supposed to be?
These here?
Half an hour?
If we're at 90 minutes, I think,
You've
and it
taken more
stays
time to
concise,
make-
I think 90
in this-
minutes would be great if you can.
Why can't we combine those? I do 2 or 3 subjects a night. That's what I would suggest.
Well, why don't we start and see how things go? I mean, fire company funding, if we don't spend all night on it, maybe then,
Exactly, I think that would be it, so if everybody's focused on there, you could get a
If
couple,
we
so I think
limit-
you're right. See how it goes, the first one, fire funding goes.
Yeah, to the extent possible, it would be good to know what we're going to talk about in advance, far enough in advance where the pre-work that's going to go into each of these meetings can be done. For example, if we get through fire company in a half hour, it would be difficult to throw capital on the back end of it that night, because there's going to be a lot of work that we're going to be doing leading up to April 29 that we may not have ready by March 18. Same with sanitary sewer, because we've got Gannett Fleming out now doing the high-level sewer review. We wouldn't have that necessarily by March or so. Just keep that in mind. To the extent we can plan, if we're going to stack these up, that would help the conversation, so we have all the pre-work done and distributed in time.
well, if we're going to designate an hour and a half for each one of these meetings, and if we get done early, and we can see how it goes with fire company and the capital. If we see we're moving through these pretty quickly, which I just don't see. I don't see that happening. But then we can maybe look forward and say, well, maybe community organization and tree maintenance we can combine, or those two. Maybe they aren't going to be one whole meeting themselves. But we need to talk about, like, do we want the community organizations coming in and giving us what they're looking for, their perspectives, or or is this really just going to be us kind of deciding? So I think some of these are just, we're going to have to let it play out a little bit. And if we're done in a half hour, we're done in a half hour, and everyone can go to Wayne and have dinner.
I think to Bill's point, you've got some outside entities that will be here participating in some of these. Community organizations, you want to give all those groups enough time in advance to be able to say, okay, clear this night because this is the night we're going to talk. Tree maintenance, sidewalk repairs, trees, again, you got PICO that's involved. You have to bring ODOT in, not ODOT, PennDOT involved.
We might do better
I
on
know we
that.
might, maybe. But to bring PennDOT in so that they can listen to the conversation dialogue, because they are responsible. This is where we have to offload these to say, look at all the trees we take care of on state routes. Those should not be our responsibility. Those should be clearly PennDOT. And then you've got PICO. What are their plans on tree maintenance? And then are they going to continue to go through and hatchet job some of these trees up that they do that are just abomination of what they did at best? Where are all those at? What plan wires are all factored into this. Does Verizon and Comcast get in play? Because we're having a heck of a time on Morris Road trying to get them out and say, we don't do tree maintenance. Well, who does? Verizon and Comcast says, we don't cut trees. Well, then what do you do with your wires? It's the trees.
Let them sag down, hang down.
I mean, that's an issue. I'd like to see the Comcast and Verizon reps be here as part of that to say this is not acceptable.
Well, and to Jake's point, if they, the committee chairs want to have a committee meeting, if Jake wants to call a public safety committee meeting and talk about the safety service communications in April, then we had that conversation early and then bring it back to the board and you will have a conversation and we can talk about it in May. Maybe we tag that on to the sanitary sewer. Or if Jack wants to have a sewer committee meeting. Is that what it's called? Public Works and Sewer?
Public Works and Sewer.
Public Works and Sewer. Then that saves us, then we can eliminate,
Well, I think part of the subcommittees will work on things like public works, that involves too, changing, where we're at with the recycling program, where are we at with, yard waste, the changes we want to propose there. So there's a lot of work can be done in those committees too, outside of this.
I think the thing that's most important to remember with all of this, and I don't know if anyone else feels similarly that I did, but being faced with this budget, really honestly only 8 weeks to run through it, learn everything, hear from everyone who has the requests, understand where we are moving forward, where we sit presently, and then try to also deal with some of these things. There just isn't enough time. There's not enough time, and I think that having these conversations early, starting to have a plan, even if it is, even things are bubbling up from the committees, and advising the full board, I think that's makes for a better process, and I think something that the community can also be more engaged in, and it's not just at the last minute, oh my God, we need to do this, and we have a week to figure it out. So.
Well, there's a lot of community groups that want to be involved with a lot of these as well. They want to participate.
Question. And that's the subcommittee that puts the meat on on the bones of each of these special topics?
It could be if the chairs, if those who are the chairs of those committees are willing, like Jake said, he'd be willing to have call a public safety committee meeting and talk about the safety service communications. He works with staff, and then you get the Del Val people in, and that happens, and that's still a public meeting, and the community can still be part of it, and bring that back to the full board.
May I ask who the chair of the stormwater subcommittee is?
Jack?
So there's not actually a specific stormwater subcommittee,
Stormwater on public works.
but I think that it'd probably fit under Public Works and the existing sewer that we have, so that's me, I guess.
Okay. Would you open your subcommittee meeting up for the public too? Is that what you're saying?
So any subcommittee meetings are always going to be open to the public.
Okay.
And I'll tell you that I'm planning on having Public Works and sewer meetings anywhere between once a month to once a quarter. So they'll be published comfortably in advance, and I'm hoping to have them regular. We just have not yet had a chance to circulate dates because we just got new committee assignments in the last meeting.
In Slack?
Yeah.
It's unusual to have stormwater, that's in a separate group, right? So Public Works and Sewer, I wouldn't think that would be under stormwater, but whatever. I gotta say, I'm not clear with what the subcommittee versus these meetings are. And this is why I voted against all these meetings when we scheduled them. I'm not sure what benefit we're going to do here and subcommittee. So, Bob, you seem to be saying that subcommittee is operational and for the commissioners to work on finding out where their individual subcommittee elements relate as operationally with the township, that these are board meetings for specific items related to the budget.
Well, I think that's part of it, but there are many topics that are introduced at the board meeting where all the board may say, I'm not fully aware of this. that would be assigned to a subcommittee to be able to vet and go through whatever that is, whether it's a purchase, whether it's a program, whatever it is that's introduced at the board level, either ordinance or resolution, can be assigned to the subcommittee, so that instead of an hour and a half at the board meeting, there could be an hour spent at a subcommittee to go through all that work, all the details, answer all the questions, then come back to the board to say, okay, now this is fully prepared, because if there's any changes within any of a resolution or ordinance, those changes can be made at the subcommittee level and recommended, and then it's delivered as, here's a product after all this work that's been done at the subcommittee. Here, this is again board action, board setting policy, board setting direction, goals. This is what we want to achieve as a board. So you're actually, these are policy decisions that the board will be making. Huge part is budgetary. How do we plan for all this?
So you realize now we have subcommittee meetings, special meetings, and regular board meetings. Okay, so.
But not everybody attends every.
Yeah, I kind of, I'm missing what the cutoff is, but anything else for this meeting?
Is there any other board members that have any questions or concerns?
I just suggest that we maybe want to flip fire company funding and sanitary sewer. It seems like sanitary sewer is getting worse, not better, and addressing that sooner rather than later, I think, should be a priority. I think the fire company is very important. I don't want to in any way diminish them, but we've already set the number for the fire company for last year. We're not going to, as a board, decide what they should do in order to reduce their costs going forward, because that has to be on them, not us. There's a limited amount that we can do for the fire company, aside from either choosing to pay them more or less in the future, or trying to set them as a separate budget item and ask the township residents to pay directly.
That actually makes sense. Why even have fire company funding on there at all?
You sound so shocked, like that makes sense.
Fire funding, you're looking at significant increases to that operation. If you heard from Radnor Fire, I mean, really the whole area is shifting towards full-time numbers, full-time, which is I mean, you look at what the police department's budget is. That's what you'll adopt as the full-time fire department that you will have to give. So here the idea was to have the conversation. If the decision by the board is to say, let's put this out to the vote of the public, there's time in which, if you set it in November, you set it whatever, but there's plenty of time for the fire companies to be able to go out and promote work for passage.
But I think the point for 2019 is we made this call. We made it. We're increasing, whatever it is, we added 100,000, that call's made.
But this is
Doesn't need to be
2020.
I
first.
believe they asked for a lot more money
They
than
did.
that.
So they asked for 250, and we gave them 100.
Excellent.
And I think they're setting the table for, this is only the beginning. It's only going to keep going up.
It seems like our conversation is going to be limited to, are we willing to pay them more for 2020, yay or nay? And if the answer is we don't have the money in our budget, are we going to kick it directly to the taxpayers? And that's a conversation that we can have.
At a regular meeting.
Well, yeah, at a regular meeting, I
Have it at a
guess, but
regular
we
meeting.
have to pick a date to have it. And I think this is fine, because we've got other things to do at regular meetings. My issue is just, I want to make sure we have that conversation in time to get the petition signed so that they can put it on the ballot if they need to. I don't know what that date is. But I do kind of want to deal with sanitary sewer. I guess we could do it sanitary before capital, or we could do sanitary in lieu of goal setting or something, but.
The problem that I have with moving sanitary up that much is that you have these emergency sewer breaks, and they typically happen in the winter. So I think that you would be able to get a
They
better
happen
gauge.
year-round.
Pardon?
Yeah,
They happen year-round, but they're more likely, I would
July
think.
4th every year.
July 4th, every year, August.
Well, I mean, let me rephrase, they probably happen more in the extreme heat and the extreme cold, but I would think that maybe waiting until April just to get a gauge on what our costs are over the winter may make more sense.
Yeah, but he's still waiting for the report.
Yeah, I
We can get through.
texted Steve just to see if he knew off the top of his head when that Gannett Fleming report is due. I apologize, I don't know it off the top of my head.
It's really difficult to hear when there's multiple people talking. I think that
Mr. Nagel's talking down at the end, if we could have just one at a time.
Oh, Rich.
Gentlemen,
Fire company, though, I would say, put it at a regular meeting and let the whole public talk about it.
They're welcome to come. The whole public is here today.
Special meeting, let's have it a regular meeting.
Regular meetings are supposed to be for business.
We've talked about it, it is business.
So I think-
What more business for the township could there be
We don't
than
need to fight
fire
over-
protection?
Just on the
Topics.
sanitary sewer one, the study that the board adopted is not the detailed one that was recommended by us to do. So
Right.
we're not going to get the detail that I think you're looking for in the Gannett Fleming report, up to the conditions of every single sewer line. It's a high level. You didn't opt to take the detailed one, which is a whole lot more money.
Well, that other
a lot more
report wasn't
time.
gonna do that either.
Sewer and capital.
It was gonna give us a good feel
I
of
mean,
what
it
we
was
have.
more focused on the Act
Just
90
sewer,
stuff.
what's it?
That's how Jim.
The one that was on the agenda, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's
There
what
was
we
an
all
interim
talked about.
discussion about what level of detail when
Don't
you're
remember that.
engaging Gannett.
Yeah.
Which I understand, that's his project, but.
Why don't we flip sanitary and capital?
Okay.
And we'll be fire company.
Wait, I thought capital was the most important thing we were doing. It seems to me the capital, we have multiple projects that we approved last year that we didn't fund in this budget. Got to address those. There was 4 or 5 projects that were funded, that were approved and still not funded.
Or we can improve.
So the suggestion would be capital, sanitary, and fire. Reshuffle the deck that way.
I guess you guys are right. If the Gannett Fleming report is going to come out on May 12th or something, then it makes sense to at least wait until May 13th to have the sanitary sewer discussion then. If that's the thinking, I can withdraw my complaint. If the Gannett Fleming report is going to be out substantially before then, I would like to go maybe move that up, but it sounds like we just don't have that answer right now. So why don't we leave it where it is?
We can leave, why don't we leave it where it is?
That'll give me time to run a couple of sanitary sewer meetings in advance, maybe.
There you go. And we can always flip it.
Sure.
Our first one's gonna be goal setting, so.
That would be
And we
good.
don't wanna flip that because we do have the outside consultant coming in.
I thought this was goal setting. I know.
I thought sanitary sewer public utility had to do with the revenue goals vis-a-vis the rate. Sanitary sewer public utility was about running it like a public utility, which means running it at a break even for the township. Isn't that what you wanted to talk about with that?
That one, and then also the condition of the system, about what you're.
Well, that relates to that issue.
You will, and then the increase in staffing that will be necessary for us.
Alright. We'll just leave them as is. We can certainly amend as we're going along. But with enough time to give staff, what the time they need to put together the information to help make an informed discussion.
I'm still missing, Lisa, why wouldn't we do these at a sanitary sewer public utility? Why wouldn't we do that at a regular meeting? Fire company, why wouldn't we do that at a regular Monday? 2 times a month, we meet.
Rich, I
Because the
think we-
meetings already last
Yeah.
until midnight and 1 a.m. We're
And
trying
we
to get
have
out.
Well, let's
plenty
cut
of
some of the
other-
extra stuff
we have
and
plenty
work
of
on these
other
items.
business. Rich, I think we've all agreed that we're gonna go through and have these meetings. If it's, we're setting forth what the agenda items are. We're gonna try to work through them. There could be opportunities where a meeting is longer or shorter, and there could be opportunities where we combine things, or there could be opportunities where we delete things altogether because different subcommittees have met and vetted that out, and then are ready to bring it forward to the full board for discussion. But right now, I think laying this out, at least we have it, we can always cancel, we've said that from the very beginning, but I think that we need to have this time and talk about these things. We do not have time at our regular meetings. We do not have time. We don't want to be there until midnight, 1 a.m., and neither does the community. I think it limits the ability of the community to be part of the conversation. So we're going to move forward with these, and again,
But again,
I think
Lisa,
people-
these are the
I
items we
hear what
should
you're
be
saying.
doing at the public meeting. And we do these at special meetings, you have less focus from the public and less opportunity. These are fire company funding, public utility are proper for the regular meeting, so you get the most eyes on it.
Okay, well, we will certainly be noticing these meetings and giving the community plenty of time. We will also give the fire company plenty of notice so that they can be here and participate. And if we need to cancel because we've already discussed it, or it's something that came up sooner, or it was dealt with in a subcommittee, we will do so. Okay, anything else?
Did you have something else to say?
All right.
So,
We will, yeah, we'll have some public, I just want to make sure staff, if there's anything else.
so are we deciding to leave this alone for now?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else from staff? Anything else from commissioners? Okay, public comment.
Baron Gemmer, South Wayne.
Wait,
Leave that up for a
just,
second,
can
Phil.
Baron,
I
if
think
they
you can-
sit back there, can they be heard?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to be sure.
Although you've discussed this, to the extent that these affect external organizations, like you discussed the fire company, and more so community organizations, to the extent possible, I would move up community organizations, because if it's going to impact their budget for 2020, which it likely could, I mean, some of these are longer term discussions, but those might be shorter term, and they would be aware of what changes might be in effect. They would have more time to plan, either positively or negatively based upon those. I know it's not the most important thing from the township standpoint, but from their standpoint it probably is, so the sooner we can address those, the better, so they have a better idea of what they might expect.
Great. Any other comment from the public?
Move to
All right.
adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of adjournment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Commissioner Clark absent.